While cities in Europe have always scored well for livability and Asian cities are increasingly becoming competitive, cities in Latin America are struggling in terms of livability rankings. Today, I'm going to tell you the best, most livable cities in Latin America and my thoughts for anyone who wants to move there. Every year, The Economist publishes a list of the world's most livable cities. I happen to not agree with some of those in the top 10. They generally have high taxes, and the things that they're good at, you can replicate if you're a successful person in many other places in the world. Here at Nomad Capitalist, we believe you can live anywhere, and you can take advantage of good health care. You can take advantage of culture and infrastructure, and they're much more stable countries than the average person would believe. But Latin America has been a laggard. I spend a little bit of time every year in Bogota and Colombia. I occasionally visit other parts of the world. But it is the one part where I just really don't have a lot of my life. I don't have really any banking in Latin America. I don't spend that much of my time there. And so I'm going to explain to you what The Economist says are the best cities. I know a lot of people, particularly from the US and Canada, enjoy living in Latin America, and they are good choices. But let's go through the most livable cities in Latin America. Number one is Buenos Aires, Argentina. This was a place that always had good culture, was always just a great place to live. For someone who's traveling, it's pretty far down there, but you've seen a number of airlines have, with a stopover generally in Sao Paulo, connect to pretty much anywhere in the world, including Istanbul, Dubai. It's become much easier, if not still long, to get to. Obviously, the more interesting development in the last year has been the election of Argentina's new president, who's promising to do some serious damage in terms of improving the economy and getting rid of all the historic problems that Argentina has faced. If that works, Buenos Aires will be an absolutely unstoppable place to live, not just from the things that The Economist wants to see, but from what a nomad capitalist wants to see, which is why we've told many of our clients to consider an affordable option of adding Argentine residents to their plan, which doesn't necessarily require them to move there, but gives them the ability to do so in the near future if they wanted to. Number two, Santiago, Chile. No doubt a very livable place, a place I happen to find a little bit boring. Walking around parts of Santiago feels almost like walking around like Vancouver or somewhere in Canada. Stuff just works. They've gotten to that next level where even like the sidewalk crossings don't just work, but they've got extra, bells and whistles that really work. And so Chile has been an option for folks for a number of years. I find it to be not as livable in terms of just enjoying life, but I suppose if you found a nice beach community outside of Santiago, that could work. Montevideo, Uruguay, also I find it a bit boring. Certainly it is livable. It meets the stability requirement, which The Economist looks at. San Juan in Puerto Rico is a place where a lot of Americans go and live to take advantage of the tax incentive there because they don't want to renounce their citizenship, but they want to dramatically reduce taxes on things like investment income. A lot of them will say it's tolerable. And so how that's the number 4 city here, I'm not entirely sure. Number 5 comes in Lima, Peru. Great cuisine. I guess if you live in a place like Miraflores, livable enough. The least livable, Caracas, Venezuela. Interesting that I've had a few friends and one of our colleagues who've been to Venezuela recently, and they say they have cleaned up a good amount of the crime. Things have gotten better, and yet you can buy properties at extremely low prices. I mean, gated community properties, large homes, $100,000. And so that's an interesting place to look at. Not saying people should rush and move to Venezuela, but could be a place to keep an eye on. It's one that we are keeping an eye on with a growing team in Latin America. We want to know when that's going to become worthwhile. Because if you're living in a gated community, that's a little bit different. Aguas Calientes, Guatemala City, Mexico City, I happen to disagree with. We'll come back to that. Querétaro is number 5 least livable. So Mexico City is a place that we've talked about a lot. I am a cities person. I understand everyone wants to live in a big city. I understand people talk about air pollution in Mexico City. Perhaps that's just something I'm a little wired to overlook. I don't know. I've been to India, and I can't say the air pollution terribly bothered me. I've been to China. I can't say it terribly bothered me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. But to me, Mexico City, and again, I'm talking from the perspective of a nomad capitalist. You have a high income or you have a high net worth. You've got endless options. You've got great service. You've got a service culture. It's like if not a 24-hour city, pretty close to it at a time when even places like New York are not really 24-hour cities anymore. I mean, if you're walking around at 4 a.m. in Mexico City, there's hustle, there's bustle. People are setting up, they're selling things. To me, that's the kind of life I want to have. I want some excitement. Maybe not every day, but you have that opportunity in Mexico City. You have beautiful parks, beautiful museums. The Economist list is they talk about stability, healthcare, culture and environment, education, and infrastructure. Mexico, to me, and a lot of Americans, a lot of Canadians, a lot of people from all over the Western world have moved to Mexico because it was one of the most open places during the pandemic. Is it the most stable? I guess not, and yet I've never seen it affect my life. Healthcare, I've gotten decent healthcare in Mexico. Number one, the doctors still come to your house. I've gotten simple treatments. I've gotten more advanced treatments done in Mexico. I think the doctors, quite frankly, are, not bad. You don't have maybe some of the luxurious environments that you'd have in Singapore or Malaysia at the hospital, but I've never found it to have bad health care. For me, part of good health care is the doctors actually care, and I felt a lot more of that in Mexico than where I'm from in the U.S. Culture, I think that's one thing Latin America is not lacking in. Education and infrastructure. I suppose infrastructure in a place like Mexico City isn't as good, and yet I don't know that I've ever had a problem getting around. And if you're a nomad capitalist, you're probably not sending your kids to public schools anywhere you move. And so I think there's plenty of decent educational opportunities. Homeschooling's allowed. So anyway, pushing back on some of the stuff in the region in general, but particularly in Mexico City, because I think it's a good place. So Buenos Aires came in 82.8. Caracas bring up the rear at 47. Kind of in the middle, Bogota, where I spent a little bit of time, 61.2. Again, I'm sure some of the things the Economist is looking at is there's no metro line in Bogota. They've been proposing that, I guess, for a long time. They have the Transmilenio. They have the bus line. Are you taking the bus? Are you taking the subway? This is not to be an elitist. This is to say that some of these things are looking at how kind of a cross-section of life for the average person, and that may not apply to you. When I'm in Bogota, I walk around my own neighborhood. I keep my phone in my pocket. I put my watch, under my sweater, but I still carry nice stuff around. And, I just go about my life walking around my neighborhood. There's beautiful shops. There's beautiful restaurants. People are in a good mood. To me, that's livability. Some of these places in Latin America, indeed, are not the safest statistically. And yet, in Mexico City, as an example, I don't know that that's an issue for you in your daily life. Panama City, again, kind of boring and not that cheap, by the way, thanks to the dollar. 68.6. San Jose in Costa Rica. Who the hell is living in San Jose? 73.6. That city's a dump. I mean, Costa Rica itself, beautiful country, great place to be. San Jose, my goodness. Guatemala City, don't really have any experience there. Here's my biggest issue is, and they actually rank San Juan at different numbers. They show it at 78.8 and 74.2. Get your act together, Economist. I don't know how that scores. I always think there's some kind of Western/US bias in these reports. Rio and Sao Paulo both around 70. So here's the bottom line. I mean, as always, Southern South America is probably the most stable part. I also find that perhaps outside of Buenos Aires, it's the most boring part. And so perhaps that's what you're looking for. I don't find as much culture in Santiago as I would in Mexico, or in Panama City for that matter, as I would in Mexico City, as I would in Bogota, even Lima. I mean, some of the best restaurants in the world, top rank in the world are in Lima. And that has to be worth something. So Latin America does struggle, though, in the livability rankings, and I understand. There's a certain lack of consumer conveniences. Colombia does now have Amazon. They ship stuff down from the U.S., I guess, so that makes it easy enough to kind of get stuff done. But, consumer conveniences like shopping malls, things to buy stuff, it's generally not as strong in Latin America as it would be in Asia. I don't think Europe is super convenient either, but you can order a lot of stuff online. Tax friendliness in Latin America generally isn't as good, so a country like Uruguay or Panama, has decent tax friendliness. If you're living full-time in Colombia or even in Argentina, until this guy takes a hatchet to the tax code, you're paying a good amount in tax. Now, if you follow my advice, if you live my trifecta strategy and you go to Bogota or Mexico City or many of these places for 4 months a year, you won't necessarily have to pay taxes there. But if you're looking for a full-time home, to me, part of livability for a successful person is, are they taking half of your money? And so Latin America is not as tax-friendly as Asia. On the other hand, residence permits are much more straightforward, much more affordable, and you can actually work towards citizenship in Latin America if you do put in some time on the ground. So for a nomad capitalist, those are all things worth considering. But what I want you to understand, again, Latin America has its downsides. Statistically speaking, and I rely on the statistics, I tell you how the U.S. is actually in the bottom half of safe countries in the world. So, don't think sitting in the U.S. that you're somehow exempt from this. But no doubt, most Latin American countries are anywhere from a little bit to a lot, in the case of like Honduras, a lot, less safe than the U.S. Safety primarily is in Eastern Europe, the Gulf, parts of Asia. I guess like New Zealand is up there pretty safe. Latin America doesn't do as well. Now, do I think that you can find pockets of safety? Absolutely. I have had a problem in one Latin American country, in the capital of Nicaragua. Why would you ever live in Managua, Nicaragua? And I guess because I've been to so many places where I've had no problems with safety, I kind of said, all right, who's going to do anything to me walking around at dusk? Well, and they did. In no other place have I had a problem. So I think that, when people talk about the lack of safety in South America, some of the comments we see is, I can't believe I couldn't go out with a hooker to a bar at 1 a.m. and not have a problem. My goodness, what has the world come to? If you avoid that kind of stuff and you stay out of the worst places, I think, some of the Central American countries in the capital cities are pretty rough. If you stay out of that, I think you're generally going to be fine. Look at Colombia. I mean, tremendous improvements in terms of everyone that I talked to in the last 25 years. And then in terms of just enjoying life and livability, we've had multiple Mexican clients who are driving Ferraris and Lamborghinis. I mean, you can build a nice life anywhere. And so for me, that's what I take away from this Economist report. Latin America is a place where you have to like it. If you like the culture, if you like the language, if you like the people, if that's your vibe, then go there, take a few precautions, set up some strategy, which perhaps Nomad Capitalist can help you create with all of our tax expertise and all of our tax experts, to not get into a terrible tax situation. There are tax-friendly countries. There are countries like Mexico where you can kind of, handle paying a relatively low amount or no tax under certain circumstances. But you have to like the region together, because it just doesn't measure up in terms of all the different kind of conveniences. On the other hand, people generally leave you alone in Latin America. You've got more wide open space. For someone who wants to own land, I mean, Malaysia is one of the few countries in Asia where you can actually own land, and you're probably not buying big tracts of land, even in Malaysia. So if you're someone who wants to own a farm and you want to buy something that's extremely affordable, you can do that in parts of South America. Paraguay, Uruguay, Ecuador, Colombia, plenty of places. There's just great opportunities for someone who wants to be a little bit outside of a city. So if you like Latin America, realize that you maybe not be in the most livable city, but from my perspective, what's most livable is you're happy and you enjoy your life and you have a nice life. So if you're doing business in North America and you don't like working later hours, you want to work your normal 9 to 5, running your business, well, Latin America is going to make that a lot easier than living in Europe or living in Asia. That's worth something. If you like the culture, that's worth something. If you want to get citizenship there, we help our clients get residence permits that lead to citizenship in Latin America. That's worth something. What I would suggest in Latin America, if nothing else, have a plan B, C, D. You can get a couple of residence permits. I mean, Mexico's one. A lot of people get residence permits in. Argentina now with the new president could be worth looking at. Other people want to, buy some land, get residence in Ecuador, for example. If you invest, nominal amounts of money in countries like Nicaragua, you can get residence permits. I'm not saying you have to necessarily live there, but I do think that at a slower pace than Asia, Latin America is, in some cases, moving in the right direction. I've had some pretty successful investments in Latin America. If I can build a plan B, C, or D there, I think that's interesting, again, especially if I'm coming from North America. Look for the countries that offer some kind of fast track to citizenship. It no longer exists. I got a home in Colombia because they offered me permanent residence. I don't have to go there more than 1 day per year to keep that active. I can work towards citizenship if I want to. That program that doesn't require you to live there has gone away, which is why it's always worth getting these residence permits earlier on. But for me, Latin America is a great backup location. You don't really have to invest much, if any, money to get residence there. You have opportunities. Look at the world wars of the past. Like practically nothing happening in Latin America. So it's a good backup plan. And for some people, when you go and spend time there, it's a good plan A. I spent a good chunk of 2021 in Bogota and I enjoy it. It's not my number one choice, but I'm glad that it's part of my life. And especially if you're looking for, having food stability, I'd rather be in parts of Latin America than being in the United States or being in Europe. So that's my take on Latin America. That's my take on who should go there. Rankings are a bit stagnant, but there's still opportunities for folks who want to play it that way.